Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Bryan. We're going to check out some of my favorite albums from last year since it is January. I know some people like to put these videos out in December. I feel like that's not fair. There are some fantastic albums that come out in December. How can you make a best of the year list if you haven't checked out all the albums of the year? Right? Now, yeah, there's definitely a part that you can't listen to everything, right? But you're missing out on 2 weeks of stuff. Anyways, that's a rant for another day, I suppose. This video is probably going to be fairly long. You can see the time. I have no idea. I'm just starting this project here. But I am trying to cram everything together. Last year, I tried to do multiple videos for EP and LP. And then I had so many LPs, I had to split that in half. And I ended up releasing the final one in February or something like that, and I want to avoid that. So this is going to be pretty big. We are going to check out some of my favorite new bands, whether they released their first EP or LP this year, some of my favorite EPs, and then also my favorite LPs, which, as usual, I'm grouping into the 4 groups that I like to use here: Fun Rides, Heavy Art, Beautiful Soundscapes, and Eternal Spins. Those albums that I just couldn't stop playing. I just keep listening to them. It's going to be pretty big. I think we're covering 25 albums, which is crazy for a top 10, but that's why I don't call it my top 10. So I suppose with all of that said, we should dive into some of my favorite debut bands put out their first work last year. Kicking it off, we have Vower with the album Apricity. This is an EP from them. I really dug their sounds. It's an eclectic mix that, well, I guess it's eclectic on paper. It's light, atmospheric, alternative rock with some post-hardcore vocals that's also paired with progressive metal riffs. I guess more on the djenty side of things. However, the phrasing of some of the riffs can get a little obtuse. They really focus on, I think, jamming an atmosphere over all else, but it doesn't stop it from being incredibly catchy and groovy, and there's actually some pretty sick riffs in here as well. It's a little all over the place in that regard. While I think, though, when you listen to it, it all perfectly meshes up. Sonically, the way that the instruments come together, both in their tone and in the way that it's all mixed with the vocals into all of it, it just sounds great. There's a strong amount of diversity here between high and low energy, the strong push and pull on each of the tracks that gives it nice pacing throughout and allows the album to never really get old. Granted, it's a short album too, sitting at just 17 minutes. And I guess I should stop using the word album, even though I kind of use that encompassing EPs and LPs. I guess technically it's just an LP word. But I mean, at 17 minutes, it doesn't really have a chance to get old or boring, but they certainly don't allow for that either. The 4 tracks also have their own distinct personalities, with the first one I think being the heaviest of it. The production is fantastic, and there are harsh vocals on it if that's your cup of tea. I enjoyed them a bit because they sound pitched to me. There is a melodic movement to the harshes, even though harsh vocals don't really have pitch to them. It's the perception of the pitch that comes through the noise and the compression. And all of it just comes together into something that works really well for me, bringing together the melodic side of things that I love and the high energy writing with more atmospheric and texture based stuff. The song that I picked does have some harsh vocals in it, but they don't exist in the snippet that I am going to use here as a little example of their work. If the sound is up your alley, but you're like, actually I need some screams in here, definitely go check them out. Just because I'm not putting them here doesn't mean they're not in the album.
Now no one knows what to believe. The facts are fiction, creating your own contradiction. When we become one-minded, awake a failure to the rise of the way.
The next band is Gore, A Bud That Never Blooms. I hate to make comparisons on bands, but I think the easiest way to describe them is that they're definitely a metal band that comes out in the wake of a post Sleep Token or Spirit Box world. You can find a lot of the same elements of that music in here, though I would never necessarily call them a copycat. But you can see how the influence is certainly there. This is a metal band where the metal is more of a texture, a flavor. You're not going to find a lot of cool metal riffs on here. It's usually just heavy, drop, down tuned guitars that are there to create that gritty metallic texture or the weight that metal does so well. On top of pop music, I guess would be the best way to describe it at times. The production on this album is absolutely phenomenal. And there's quite a few passages on here that use a lot of digital instrumentation and effects to great lengths to create something that feels, well, very poppy in a lot of ways, but that's usually contrasted pretty heavily once the guitars kick in and the drums kick in and the vocalist changes from very sweet, poppy vocal style, whether that is a bit more belted or something a bit lighter, like you might hear from Billie Eilish, into full on metalcore screams. It is the drastic juxtaposition between the two sides that draws my attention to them, but works in a way that Sleep Token doesn't always for me, and I'm not quite sure why that is. I might just have to listen to more Sleep Token to figure out why. They're a band that I've really only checked out a couple of their big singles rather than full albums. But the writing on this album just feels more cohesive to me. It doesn't just randomly jump between these ideas. There seems to be movement, direction to it. And that is part of what drew me to this too. It's something that I've praised bands like Sleep Token of in the past, is the ability to balance out the dense textures with more melodic writing, the heaviness of metal with the light atmospheric element of pop, the sort of blunt production of metal and the very complex production of electronic music. Despite bringing in some more metallic elements, the album stays palatable throughout the entire time. And it's kind of difficult to showcase everything this album does. Much like a good pop album, every track is going to be unique, going for a different angle. So I picked a clip here that I think kind of showcases the gulf between some of their lightest and heaviest aspects, but in no way do I think it encompasses the entirety of the album. Regardless, I hope you enjoy it, and if you do, I highly suggest checking them out.
But I wanna know, I wanna feel just like we all do. You wanna know what you can't take with you when you die. When you die. And I hope you love the heaven you haunt. Just stay away from me and my gods. You will never see angels like you want. Angels like you want.
Do you like big, meaty guitar tones that just are so low and punchy that you kind of feel it in your headphones and your speakers? Ghostkill might have your back, particularly if you enjoy that tone mixed with syncopated rhythms. This is very much a genty progressive metal album, although they deviate from that quite a bit. In fact, each of the 4 songs feels quite unique despite the heavy use of these syncopated, meaty guitar tones. We have a little bit of alternative rock in here, some alternative metal, some industrial metal, maybe even, some post-hardcore, and the vocal melodies tend to feel a bit more, not necessarily pop rock, but poppier rock, I suppose. all of this is juxtaposed with some really gnarly harsh vocals in here as well that usually come through in the more straightforward genty progressive metal sections, and it really is the juxtaposition between these lighter types of metal and even a little bit of rock that tend to get pushed right up against this straight up gent stuff. It's a what do they call it? Uh, it's a combination of sounds that I think would not have held my attention for the entirety of the runtime if they hadn't have continued to experiment with what they were pairing with this gent. And this is something I've mentioned in the past, that, you know, gent just isn't usually my cup of tea in isolation, and I like hearing it interspersed with other styles. And while this doesn't really ever allow the different types of music to commingle, just having them back to back is enough to kind of allow gent to do what it does well, which is feel punchy and groovy. And you just, as soon as those sections come in, you just gotta like start bobbing your head. You gotta get into it, right? And for those to come after more atmospheric sections that focus more on the textures of the guitars and vocal harmonies and stuff like that, it really allows the highlights of this rhythmic syncopation to come through in the ways that they alternate. So, I did pick a track. Much like the other two, it's tough to pick one song to represent this entire album, as each track is different, but again, if this interests you in any way, I highly recommend checking out the rest of the EP. And that wraps up the debut bands for EPs. We do have 3 more bands that released an LP last year, their first one, and this is going to be a bit more diverse. I recognize that all 3 of those EP debuts were metal oriented. We are going to kick it off though with some death metal. Not just regular death metal though, technical death metal. The band is called Deathless. Their album, The Clairvoyance. It is exactly what you would expect given the genre description of tech death. There's fast technical playing here, there's some strong melody writing, exceptionally wide rhythms, and everything just sounds cool. Definitely has that rule of cool edginess going on where, yeah, I mean, there's technically proficient playing here, but also it just sounds ridiculously awesome, which is something that I think metal just does really well. But this is all paired with something else. I like tech death generally, and given the amount of growls on here, I might not have necessarily gravitated to this album too much, but there is a almost cinematic quality to the atmospheric writing on this. It's both in how the atmospheres tend to feel in mixing, in production, as well as some extra secondary sounds that can appear behind, but there's also extra instrumentation that appears throughout the album as well, such as choirs, string sections, and even bells. And all of this comes together to create sections of this album with really strong layering in it that creates a vast contrast between the more stripped down parts of the album. On many of these songs, you'll have a verse that is just driving death metal, really cool guitar riffs, but that's it. You got your guitars, your bass, your drums, and your vocals. And then we'll get into the chorus, and this is where all the extra layers will come in, and it really punches it up. And it does something that I don't hear too often in metal, which is size contrast. It's dynamics of flow almost, where the intensity rises. We have these moments that feel bigger than the others, and it gives the song a bit more of an ebb and flow than some death metal does. And to me, that's enough to keep my attention on it. So, here's a little snippet of that. This is very indicative of the album. If you like it, definitely go check out the LP. Neacal, Stranger from Long Ago. I promised a little bit more diversity here, and this is where I'm going to deliver it. This is some absolutely gorgeous folk music with phenomenal atmosphere, and it can bounce around between a variety of different sounds. Some songs are a bit more carefree and relaxing. There's some songs that are tense, and even a couple that have a bit more of a darkness to them, something a bit more ominous, never really getting into anything truly aggressive in any way, but just beautifully bleak, maybe. On top of all of this wonderful atmospheric writing, we have these very warm vocals that tell stories almost. It's just a beautiful thing to listen to, and the album goes by too quickly. I don't remember how long it is, but I remember when it was over, all I could think to myself was that's it. I would really like some more, and I believe I hit replay on it immediately just because it was that gorgeous. I wanted more at that moment. The cool thing about it too is that every song is unique while still working within the confines of writing folk music. Each track is a little bit different. Some are light and dancey. There's a couple that feel just very cinematic, very larger than life. Others are calming and soothing. And as I mentioned, some are a bit more darker. One even feels like it was inspired a little bit by some of Danny Elfman's expanded orchestration that can be found in some Oingo Boingo tracks. It's a fun ride throughout, but I also feel like it's just quite relaxing. Fun feels like the wrong word, but it's very light. It's very easy to engage with it. It doesn't really demand a lot of attention. It just sounds great to listen to.
Troops concealed in the black hole, out of control.
Here's an album that I'm interested to see how reception grows over time. As of right now, I really enjoyed Jax's debut album, Dear Joe, but it seems that a lot of public reception is not too kind to it. Makes me wonder what they heard that I didn't, or maybe what I heard that they didn't, that made me appreciate it more. Maybe it's just that I don't listen to enough pop. I don't know. But what I heard here is a very cool mix of Billie Eilish, Demi Lovato, and some chamber pop thrown in. And I kind of like a lot of that. And the combination of that left me a lot to like in this album. The orchestration of the songs mixed with the way that they grow, it creates new layers after each repetition, allowing the songs to feel like slow burns that aren't slow burns. It's just an evolution of a motif, usually looking at theme and variation, and it creates some lovely sounds and atmospheres across this. All of the beauty that's created is often juxtaposed with lyrics about vulnerability, fear, anxiety, and other negative topics. Musically, it's kind of light and fun generally with some heavier atmosphere, but lyrically it's a bit on the darker side of things. The album never really gets too heavy though, as there's comedic ukulele interludes. If you look at the track list, it looks like a massive album, but it really isn't that long. And it's because every other track or so is a little 30 to 60-second segment of just Jax and a ukulele singing about something comical. Usually some sort of comedy skit, and usually the punchline is not comical, but the setup is, and it's that sort of bleak humor that I think just really clicks with a millennial. Speaking of the lyrical topics, I just want to point out that the song that I chose for this little snippet here, this example, the song's called I Choose Violence. It's about men who date young and how that affects women in relationships. So, a little heavier of a topic.
But when you were 13, she wasn't alive. And by the time you were 18, well, that girl was 5. You had a teaching degree, well, she was learning how to drive. And you'll make her feel safe, like you made me feel safe. Like, oh my God, you're so mature for your age. Except she's not your age. So I choose violence, I choose war, for all the little girls that should be warned. I could choose silence, but what for? You took my innocence, now I'll take yours, and you'll choose hiding.
And that's the list of brand new artists I wanted to put a little bit of a spotlight on. Next, we're going to be moving into my favorite EPs of the year. I do just want to say I listened to more EPs last year than I think I have ever in my life. I don't know if it was just that LPs were seeming too long for me. I don't know if it's a lot of the artists that I followed were putting out really long albums. Maybe it was just the mindset I was in. But one thing that I can always appreciate about a good EP is that there's no fluff or filler on them. Usually only sitting between 4 and 6 tracks. They get in, they do what they're going to do, and then they leave, usually leaving me wanting more. But even if it was something that didn't work for me, the 10 to 20 minute time limit makes me feel like it wasn't too much of a lost investment by giving it a shot. For whatever reason, though, I greatly enjoyed a bunch of EPs, and I think that this list of EPs is even longer than my list of favorite LPs from last year. With that said, though, let's dive into this. I tried to put them into some order that I thought would be kind of cool, maybe softest to heaviest, but given the wide range of some of these projects, that didn't really work. So we're just going to do it in alphabetical order. First up, Artificial Language, Distant Glow. It sits somewhere between Tesseract and Polyphia, which sounds absolutely wild to me as I view them as two totally different types of approach to writing guitar parts in progressive music, but somehow Artificial Language marries the two. It's kind of bonkers listening to this. It has a lot of the atmospheric and groovy elements that Tesseract likes to employ in their music, but also the highly expressive, bonkers, complex playing and finger tapping alongside expressive chords that Polyphia likes to play around with. The songs end up feeling very bouncy and groovy throughout, given that we're combining some of this light and delicate fingerwork that we get from Polyphia with the straight up genty groove that Tesseract likes to play with. All of this is mixed well with some catchy vocals, which I think is the thing that really seals the deal for me. The vocals are expressive and powerful, but also the melodies just get stuck in your head so easily, and that actually goes twofold because the guitar melodies are also quite catchy as well. My favorite track on here is Rain Follows, and the ending to it is just such a phenomenal moment, but I'm going to leave that for you to discover, and instead I'm going to play you a different snippet from the album. trope in a lot of anime is the beach episode, which is usually an episode that doesn't have much to do with the larger arc at play in the story, that allows the characters to go to the beach and just have a day off. Sometimes it even includes groups of characters that are in opposition of each other and kind of brings the stakes down. If they find each other on the beach, they'll maybe do some sports or beach volleyball or something to see who's better. Usually nobody wins, they're both exhausted by the end, and then they go their separate ways, and it's never talked about again in the rest of the show. It's just a fun episode that's kind of like fluff, but is so lighthearted that you kind of give it a pass. Atomic Guava named their recent EP Beach Episode. I kind of get many of those same vibes. This captures a lot of that funky and fun brand of prog metal that I think they do really well, but presented a bit more lighthearted than usual. In fact, I would even call this the lightest collection of songs that they have in their entire discography. I think the harsh vocals only show up on like one or two tracks, and even when they do, it's a small portion of it rather than divvying up usually equal amount of time between the harshes and the cleans. There's also some wild shifts across all of these songs. A majority of it sticks within that prog metal, very pairing jazz chords or progressions and poppier vocal runs on top of just straight up meaty gnarly guitar work, and looking at expanded structures and stuff like that. But we get even wilder shifts to pair with that. There's a jazz sax solo on here, there's a beach guitar section alongside the metal. It is an absolutely wild, fun blast of an album that doesn't always make sense, but you just kind of give it a pass because usually they're more serious than this, and we get a chance to see them at a bit more of a lighthearted, lower stakes idea.
What do you think you get when everyone asks too much and I can't say no? I'm too familiar with the atmospheric pressure of a gaslight joke. Ooh, I've been fucking patient. I've been fucking kind. With numbers and pixels, but I'd rather hate you than a lie. Now I'm fucking ruthless. Now I'm fucking tired. I've stitched up my future with uncommon sutures, and now I would rather it always fall on me to hold this.
I had never heard of Ergo Bria before finding out about their album Change. I didn't really know what I was in store for, and honestly I don't remember why I put them into my list of things to check out, but it was an interesting experience to get through the album, one that ultimately left a bit of an impression on me. There's 4 tracks on this EP, and they all have 4 completely different mixes, both production-wise and genre-wise. It's probably a mix of like noisy post-rock with pop punk, but maybe some more punk thrown in there as the album progresses. You see, it starts off on the lightest note that it can, and as each track goes through, it gets progressively noisier. Until it ends, the final track is just some compressed, screaming Riot Girl stuff, almost completely divorced from that pop punk side of things into a more traditional punk sound. It's quite an experience that exists over just 12 minutes, and I kind of want to give a taste of 2 sides of this album, so we're going to do a little snippet of 2 tracks here.
Competition, trying to be the only one. I
a year ago, y'all had me introduced to the band Gacharic Spin. I remember enjoying a lot about it, very eclectic but exceptionally progressive too. A lot of new ideas being brought to the realm of rock, and when they released their Ace EP last year, I figured I'd give it a spin and see what was up with it. It was a lot of what I expected. It's progressive rock with all of the bells and whistles, but it also caught me off guard. There's a lot of interesting ideas in here, really taking the rock idea and progressing it, not just creating something that feels like it looks towards the past of progressive rock, but seeing where they can take the rock sound into the future. It's very fun, though. It never really takes itself too seriously, and it has a bunch of everything thrown into it. There's heavy guitar work, there's funky bass lines, there's some rapping even. The hooks are exceptionally catchy. There's some jazzy chord progressions at times. There's multiple vocalists, and the production is bonkers. It's a little bit of a lot of stuff that I enjoy, and it's all packaged together into a song, a series of songs that just works. I don't understand how it can be so effortless despite all of everything that's going on. It never really falls into the side of being overly done. And also, with everything that's going on, it's very precise and clean, but it never hits that clinical sound. It really is quite measured in a lot of ways, but ends up feeling loose, like rock should. If y'all remember from the 2022 list, I believe it was the final, I think it was the very last song on that, which I think was done alphabetically also there. But anyways, the thing is that I really, really enjoyed Greyhaven's 2022 album, This Bright and Beautiful World. I could not stop playing that album that year, and even afterwards, I've been listening to it. It's just such a good one. And so I was quite excited to see that they released some more material in 2024. The EP is called Stereo Grief, and it's more of what I want from them, although more might have been the wrong word I asked for. Everything's pumped up to the next level, which is usually a good thing, but Greyhaven also likes to dabble in noisy textures and dissonant tones every once in a while, and I do feel that this album is angstier and noisier than their 2022 one. Still, it is high energy, chaotic post-hardcore, and I absolutely love the way that they dance around between atmospheric and texture-based writing and melodic ones. The guitar riffs on here are still sick. The vocal melodies are still wonderful and catchy, and it's all contrasted with this dark grittiness. And I mean, yeah, I still quite enjoyed it. I mean, it's Greyhaven. I don't think they're going to be able to let me down anytime soon. If some of this is a bit on the heavier side for you, you might enjoy this next one, Maggie Lindemann's Head Split. For the most part, this is a straightforward pop rock album, but it does have a penchant to explore darker atmospheres, I think is the best way to describe it. The vocals are beautiful and placed on top of a plethora of drum and guitar based atmospheres. There's a ton of acoustic and reverby tracks on this as well. It's generally a bit on the lighter side as far as sonic quality is, but it can get a little darker and even grittier at times, as there are a couple of alt rock or even alt metal tracks. And awkwardly, I would say there's two songs with guest harsh vocalists on them, which that kind of threw me off. It kind of works in the context of the song. Those are more of the metalier side of things, but they do feel like they stand out quite a bit in the overall album. Regardless, though, even with those inclusions, which I found still to be on the palatable side, if you're going into this just for pop rock, you might need to skip a couple of tracks as it can get heavy at times, but for the most part, it sticks to the lighter side of things, just kind of dipping into a darker atmosphere.
So reach out for my hand and follow me to a place where it'll be you and me. Find who you die for, that's who you live for. Hold on to me now, till we're 6 feet in the ground. Find who you.
I don't remember where I learned of Mallavora, but I'm glad that I found their 2024 release, Echoes. It takes what I love about alt metal and replaces the elements that I typically find a bit more abrasive and replaces that with some lighter elements that tends to work better for me. A lot of the album dances back and forth between a very light atmospheric side of alt metal, something that feels like the lighter parts of, say, Deftones, maybe, and combines it not with the angsty side of screaming like Deftones uses, but more metalcore ideas, still focusing primarily with the atmospheric elements of the guitar work, not necessarily focusing on riffs, but allowing the weight to come through almost in a post metal kind of way. The vocals, I think, are what really pulls me through a lot of this, though, as there's a lot of clean vocals on here that are absolutely gorgeous. The melodies are catchy, and the layering is excellent too, with multiple vocal lines and even harmonies. This is contrasted, as seems to be a recurring theme for my taste last year, taking these beautiful melody lines and pairing them with absolutely gnarly harsh vocals. What I love about this, though, is that even when the harshes are present, the vocalist still likes to include backing tracks of the cleans to exist around side it, almost as if working within the atmospheric side that the instruments are crafting. There's a lot of headbanging areas in this album, but there's also plenty of beautiful, vibrant atmospheres as well, and I think it does a great job of dancing between those two sides.
Darkness where I hide, I'm bruised but I'll survive. There's a lonely heart inside of me, and I'm left to wonder why I never got to say goodbye. There's a gaping hole inside of me.
I like the twinkly guitar work of Midwest Emo, but it doesn't always catch me. I'm usually more of a fan of post-hardcore side of emo or even pop emo, which tends to still bring a bit of the energy, the darker energy from the punkier side of emo. Midwest was always just a little too light for me, and that's where Sweet Pill kind of comes in and fills a gap that I didn't know existed, but they certainly have the remedy for. They mix Midwest Emo's twinkly guitar lines with a heaviness that I feel is closer to post-hardcore, and has plenty of vocal melodies that fit alongside all of this, working well with the darker tones of the work while also feeling right at home against the counterpoint that the twinkly guitars are presenting. I don't really have anything else to say other than that. It's a very simple description, and they fill a niche that I never knew I needed. So I'm happy I found this.
Stuck on a thought, can't leave it alone. Staring at the wall that's behind you. This is the way I get when I'm stuck on a thought. Spit it out, words shoot up in my mouth. Find them on the ground. Sit down, making motion just to move. Am I meant
Last year, I included this band in my Fun Rides list as they released an LP then, and somehow they've turned around and put out another excellent EP this year. This one's called What Slept Beneath Tarvos, and it's a neat little concept going on in here. There's a handful of tracks that are actual songs, but it's a pretty lengthy track list because there's interludes between every song that act as logs to the events of this story. I didn't really get a chance to dive into it just because there was so much music to listen to last year, but it is on the top of my list of things to revisit this year that was released last year, simply because I'm curious about the whole concept of this thing. Musically, though, it's a very cool mix of metal and post-hardcore. There's some incredibly heavy sections in here and some gnarly harshes, none that I'm going to show in the snippet, though, and it's all juxtaposed by these big, powerful, clean vocals and massive atmosphere. It is a fantastic combination of sounds and brings together a lot of what I love about post-hardcore and that more metallic, heavier sound into something that, at least for me, is a perfect combination of the two sides.
and fire in our bones? Now it seems that we've conquered it before us through terror. We carry on, from waking up, from standing in the sun, to fight against the shadow. You sacrifice a life from your own. Now it seems that we've conquered it before us through terror.
This one might seem a bit out of left field, or it might seem perfectly reasonable if you've been keeping up with the patterns on this list so far. Vana is an interesting project. If I had to condense it down into a phrase to describe it, I'd call it edgy heavy pop. It has top-notch production, as you should expect with pop music, and that includes a lot of variety of digital sounds to go along with the music that is already focusing quite heavily on extensive vocal focus as well as vocal layering. There is some very fun writing on this as we jump around between quite a few different ideas, but the main thing I think here is a juxtaposition between a very cutesy bubblegum pop style and alternative metal. They sort of switch on a dime, jumping back and forth between the two in wild ways, and we have some very cutesy, childish vocals that are juxtaposed with a very full vocal that feels reminiscent of pop stars, and then, of course, have to juxtapose that with screams. It is an eclectic sound nonetheless, and one that has caught my ear. I enjoy it enough. I don't know if it's something I would re-listen to often, but it has caught my ear and put Vana on the radar for me. Not necessarily as something that I'm like, oh, I need to listen to their next thing because I really enjoyed it, but just to kind of see what direction they go in next. Though I will say there is something infectious about the way that they write. I will say, though, as a bit of a content warning, most of the lyrics are very gothic and sexual, mixing violence and sex into the lyrics. So if that's not your cup of tea, maybe this isn't the project you should check out.
Nobody's coming to save you. Don't mean like a ragdoll. I just wanna play all day. I can be a ragdoll. You can make you bend and break. I'm a little ragdoll, black and red. Shove all your needles straight through my head. Voodoo magically do you instead. Oops, I guess that means you're dead.
With that, the EP list is done. We're going to be moving into LPs, and as usual, I like to organize these into some groups. We're going to be kicking it off with Fun Rides. The first one I'd like to focus on is Ghost Funk Orchestra. Just think about those words in isolation and what they might mean together, and you pretty much get a pretty strong idea of what this group is. The album is called A Trip to the Moon. It's not always an experimental sound, but they do have some really interesting ideas. As the name suggests, there is some funky stuff going on here. And there's also some jazzy stuff. And, well, the ghost part kind of, it's a loose interpretation, but things feel kind of psychedelic. And that's sort of what you can expect here. Bit of a throwback to some funky jazzy music, but with some psychedelic stuff that came out around that same time, and pushing them together in a way that I don't think any artist did back then into an interesting idea. Next up, we have Gouge Away with the album Deep Sage. As can be expected from a band who takes their name after a song from the Pixies, this album sits on the punkier side of post-hardcore. It loves to dwell in noise and angst more so than melody, but somehow it works for me. I haven't quite figured out why, but I enjoyed listening to it and the energy and animosity that oozes out of this album. Being that it's punk adjacent, it's not super complex, but don't take that to mean that it lacks depth. It makes up for a lot of the complexity with heart and passion. There are a couple of lower energy tracks on here that introduce some more melodic ideas, but it isn't necessarily what the album does best. Did you listen to that Atomic Guava snippet earlier and think, wow, dude, I really like that? If so, I got a treat for you. The guitarist for that band, Martin Gonzalez, released a solo album last year called Suspiro. It's very similar in style. There's some different ideas to it, given that Martin has full composition duties here rather than divvying it up with the vocalist and the drummer and anyone else. But you can hear a lot of similarities, and just as that album had a lot of shifts in it away from that core prog metal sound, this one does too. A majority of this album is instrumental though, and there's a lot of groovy, genty ideas here, but there's a lot of solid melody as well. In fact, I really love the guitar melodies that show up on many of these tracks. There's also a lot of features on this too. If you enjoyed that Atomic Guava sound, you can get more of that here as the vocalist shows up on a couple of tracks here too. We also have some sax being played on track 6 from Zach Zinger, and Richard Henshall appears on track 4 as well for all of you Haken fans.
My tongue, someone ought to teach your mouth to bite down when it's overflowing.
Scene Queen, hot singles in your area. This is like a raunchy coming of age comedy, but in musical form. There's plenty of heart with this, and occasionally even a strong message, but it's all wrapped up in the most juvenile humor, and I find it to be hilarious a lot of the time, but also serious, on the underlying parts. There's plenty of sexually driven lyrics in this, and it's all drenched in a liberated femininity, but it also has some hard-hitting punches to throw out also. Musically, though, because a lot of that deals with the lyrics of it, it's a mix of alt metal, pop, hip-hop, even a little bit of country in one song. It's a big mashup of a lot of stuff, and you really have to have an open mind, I think, going into it, and be ready to be whipped around into a lot of different directions. 1 second it'll be straight up pop with electro instrumental stuff and really strong production and light vocals, and the next you're going to be getting screamed at with heavy guitars. There really is no rhyme or reason of how things change, and honestly, it brings me more laughs than anything else. Usually this kind of music would be a bit off-putting for me, but it's just so absurd that I find it endearing.
Fuck the scene. I'm the queen.
Headline spot goes to the abuser. Half my idols are fucking losers. If I'm the bitch just starting rumors, what about the dogs turn into groomers? Could bands save their fans? Oh, I laugh at the irony. Shitheads get off on blatant misogyny. I'll go full ice pick lobotomy. If I see one more, no tap apology. I'm sick of good people getting overlooked. If a bitch wants to be famous, tell him write a better hook, pussy. Pink wristbands on the gas lights, bras hanging on the bus. Yeah, you get a lot of girls, but not one is 18 plus. Pink wristbands on the gas lights, bras hanging on the bus. Yeah, you get a lot of girls, but not one is 18 plus. 18 plus, 18 plus, get those children off your bus. 18 plus, 18 plus, get those children off your busted. If nice guys finish.
I don't think I have been sent back to my teen years as hard as when SeeYouSpaceCowboy released Coup de Grace last year. It's just... It's such a 2000s post-hardcore album in all of the best ways. I mean, there's a great mix of melody in here, gnarly riffage, some screams, just like that classic post-hardcore scream. The choruses are super catchy and almost have like a pop-punk, pop-emo element to them. There's dual vocals all over the place. It is just fun and catchy, but also super gnarly at times, and it's this combination of Beauty and the Beast here that has always sort of drawn me to this style of music, particularly in this era. It was actually a little sad to hear then that just last month or so, maybe it was this month, it's been pretty recent, the lead singer has left the band, and I only just learned about See You Space Cowboy recently, and seems that it's already over now, and that's a bit of a shame. But at least I think the band got to go out on a high note. Well, at least this vocalist. It hasn't really been announced if they'll be replaced yet, but this album was fantastic. For me, 2024 was definitely a year of comfort. If you've paid attention to any patterns along, especially as far as we are into this list, you may have seen some recurring ideas in here. And a lot of the sounds that I've gravitated towards last year were sounds that I enjoyed prior to starting this channel. Genres that I already liked. Y'all have introduced me to a lot of interesting sounds, particularly in the realm of metal, and that has influenced some of my album of the year lists in previous years. But this one was about returning back to my core, and that's exactly where Set Your Sails fits into all of this. It is an iterative, comfortable, alternative metalcore album. There wasn't really a lot in here that surprised me. Everything did as I expect them to. It's not like I could predict the riffs that were being played. They did create some new stuff, of course, but where the verses went into choruses and how the songs grew and the pacing of all of it, it's what I come to metalcore for. And this is iterative writing at its finest, absolutely understanding what a sound does best and leaning into it and really, crafting that sound. There's catchy hooks in here, driving instrumental parts, atmospheric synth additions to round out sounds and atmospheres, and excellent production. It's everything I want in some alternative metalcore.
Before you speak, twisted stories to unglory. Trust me, they do not believe. Your fake facade reveals a lot. You can't disguise your enterprise. I hope it I can see through your halo, and you can run from the truth of tomorrow. The lies you hide, the shit you speak, the same old stories on repeat. I hope that you know I can see through your halo.
Next up, we have Sheena Ringo's Hojoya. And I mean, dude, it's Sheena frickin' Ringo. Is there anything else I need to add? Any more context I would need to have here to convince any of y'all that this was something that was up my alley? It's prog rock, or proggy leaning at times. There's also some alt rock that shows up. It's quite a diverse album, all focusing around a poppier rock sound maybe, but there's a lot of jazzy, funky ideas in here too. It is just a blast to listen to. And I mean, it's Sheena Ringo on vocals, right? Just fantastic vocal work and layering, and the production on this is just fantastic. Every bit of it is just a blast to listen to. It is joyous. It is just positive energy all the time throughout this entire thing, with just funky bass stuff going on too, and cool drum grooves, and it's just go listen to it. Honestly, there's too many moments for me to pick just one to highlight. This was impossible. So I picked this 40-second clip or so, but just know that there were, I don't know, 20 other ones that I could have picked for this, and they all would have sold this album just as well. speaking of comfortable music that just resonates with me, we have Vial's Burnout. This group actually put out 2 albums last year. It's kind of impressive to put out so much. Granted, both of them are a bit on the shorter side, but still, they put out a lot of music. And the best description I can have for this is like poppy, depressed indie rock. And that might seem kind of contradictory. How can it be bouncy and poppy and depressive at the same time? Somehow they strike this balance. It's sort of like a dancing to the end of the world. The album's pretty straightforward as far as indie rock goes. Not really going to hear any odd time signatures or structures or phrasings or anything. It's by the books indie rock, but it's a blast to listen to, and it goes by in a blur, and I highly recommend it.
I wake up and dread the day ahead of me, and it snooze until I fall asleep. I shout my lungs out till I can hardly breathe, and then I'll do my laundry. Just kidding. I don't wanna feel good or even happy anymore, and I don't say this so you'll have someone to feel sorry for, but it's true, I don't feel good or even happy anymore. I'm quite content with fine. I'm out of...
I know I've been critical of The Warning in the past, but it's mostly because I hear such potential, and I know that's probably not the best thing that fans of The Warning want to hear, but they're really great at writing iterative music, and I want to hear them. Like, I want to hear what they can do in their own zone, not mimicking the sounds of bands before them. I didn't really get that with Keep Me Fed, but I did hear a little bit more of them. This, much like their previous work, is defined by iteration of other generally popular sounds, but where other albums focused on a traditionally hard rock sound, this one kind of goes for more of a 2000s alt-rock vibe with big punchy drops and massive fuzzy instruments. There's a little touch of indie rock in the bass tone, and the guitar is toothy like a synth at times. It's all wrapped up in a very modern production with catchy modern vocal hooks, and honestly, it's a pretty good showcasing of their ability to merge an older sound with a modern feel. It's not quite as safe, I think, as some of their older works, but it still doesn't give me a very clear picture of who they are as musicians. But the vocal hooks are exceptionally catchy, and they seem to have their finger on the pulse with everything except, I'd say, their lyrics, which feel frequently shallow, sometimes even cringy at worst. There's a please take us seriously as adults kind of vibe to the lyrics that I think a lot of musicians in their teens and 20s kind of goes through, especially in the rock and metal realm. I don't really put too much on that on them. It's a calculated album, sure, through and through, but I need to give them credit because it is the first album of theirs that I've enjoyed from start to finish. And yes, at this point, I have listened to their entire discography. I know a lot of their fans were telling me just to dig into that, and I did. This was the first one I liked, though. Here's a little snippet of it if you're interested. It's a little different from what you might think of The Warning if you haven't checked this one out yet.
It's the meat that really matters. The bones will end up falling out. If you're gonna rock, then to the rock because they're always watching you. Couldn't be everything that you wanted me to be, but you're keeping me close like an enemy. Help me now. How am I supposed to hide? Watch me drown, ripped to shreds under the light. Sharks come circling, don't say anything. Wait for the teeth to bite you. Shut your mouth. You know they're bleeding you out.
Moving into the heavy art category, we're going to kick it off with Mabe Fratti, Sentir que no sabes. This is absolutely gorgeous. It's beautifully dark atmospheres and evocative sounds, and I tell you, dude, it is so easy to just get lost in these sounds. The production is phenomenal, the vibes are great. It's slower, but it's totally worth the patience. I promise. Most of the album is just cello and vocals, but it does occasionally get paired with other sounds. And yes, I do mean sound. It's kind of tough to describe all of it. It is occasionally other instruments, sure, but sometimes those instruments are played esoterically. Sometimes there's digital sounds being added to it. It's a bit of an eclectic take on music, and some of the songs are more eclectic and esoteric than others. All of them have a quirky side to them, but they also have a more traditional element to it. It's it's tough to describe. Let me just play you some of this and you can understand how beautiful it can be.
Zonas oscuras de mi corazón. ¿Cómo te atreves a llamarme por un nombre que no sabes decir y no puedes responder, mucho menos conocer?
Okay, I have no idea what you all have done to me. This is a post-doom metal band on my album of the year list. What? Post metal and doom metal. I mean, doom metal I'm a little more receptive to, but post metal? That's never really been my thing. But this album works. For me, anyways. It's heavy and atmospheric. It's like a horror tinged doom light with fantastic execution of vision. The elephant in the room is the focus on melody alongside the atmosphere, though this is something that I just don't think Doom does great. Doom is fantastic at atmosphere, but I really crave melody in music. And this group brings that. There's clean vocals here, and they get through sentences rather quickly, which is also something that Doom just kind of takes a long time to get through and kind of loses me in. And I think between those two things, the clean vocals, the movement through them, the speed, and the fact that there is melody alongside it are the things that really made this click, where I could feel the crushing weight and the darkness of the atmosphere of post metal and doom, but still have something to take me through that rather than just existing in that space. This is not an album I enjoyed. That being Uboa's Impossible Light. It's not just that it's not my cup of tea, but there's also so little in it that's even traditionally musical. A lot of this just sort of ends up being evocative and haunting atmospheres with exceptional staging and production that likes to be noisy and dissonant in a majority of its time. In fact, there's many passages in here that are just noise. I wouldn't even call it like noisy, where it's a cluttering of sounds. It's just sound. Not not something that would be abrasive in any way, but just not what we traditionally think of as music. I do want to emphasize though the haunting part of that description. So much of this song is unsettling and uncomfortable. The end result, though, ends up being extremely evocative. It is not something I'd like to revisit it, but definitely not something I can ignore either. Some songs, like the one I'm about to play for you, do have some more traditional musical parts to them, but much of this is just noise and drone and screaming. It's tough to look away, but I would not call this something that I think a lot of people will enjoy. Moving into beautiful sound spheres, we have. Wait, another Doom album? That can't be possible. I guess it is, though. BleakHeart's Silver Pulse. This one's interesting, though. It is, I think, technically doom metal, but it features exceptionally lush compositions. In fact, one song even takes 3 minutes just to get to any metallic sounding part at all. The rest of this album is beautifully layered violins and vocals and guitar parts. It's, I guess, maybe Doom Light or Doom adjacent, though once we get into those strong metallic parts, it's difficult to separate it out of the Doom metal genre. And I think that towing the line of is this metal or not is certainly what elevates it for me and makes it more palatable to my ears. Last year, I reacted to two songs from Caligula's Horse, The Storm Chaser and Golem. Both of those come off of this album, and if you listen to me gush about either of those tracks, especially The Storm Chaser, you'll probably have guessed that it would have appeared on this list somewhere. This album, Charcoal Grace, has amazing writing, catchy lyrics, super groovy bass lines all the way throughout this. The drum work is phenomenal, and the lyrics have the type of depth that I like. It's incredibly layered. There's so many beautiful moments. The harmonies are gorgeous. All of it just comes together into this absolutely beautiful music, art throughout. The focus of the album is on a 4-track parts. It's titled after the album, Charcoal Grace Parts 1 through 4. But honestly, The Storm Chaser is my pick. Not just as my favorite song on the album, but I think my favorite song that they've ever made. I gushed about it quite a bit. You should probably go check out that reaction if you want to know what's so great about it. I am also going to play a little bit of it for you here as the selection I picked for this album. But this is just, it's a total package of everything I love in rock, and I'm so glad I got to discover this.
In the cocoon, you knit for no one else. You never thought it could change you, could stay the same. You never could see the water in spite of the rain. Then it rose and you dove just when you needed to flow. Listen to me, it took the turn and there will be no reverse to swallow. This is a test, it's not a war. Watch as we weather the storm together. We have the calm here for the few. We could be shelter and shore, heads above water. So call for the king, stick for the view. Proud of the nothing new crew. When we stood against the storm.
Have you ever been in the mood for rock? You don't know what kind of rock, you just something a bit on the lighter side of things? Dirt Poor Robins' Firebird might be the answer for you. It's a fantastic rock opera. Great production, beautiful harmonies, multiple vocalists, biting commentary, and a nice mix of lighter and darker tones. It's everything I could have asked for, but it's also quite a varied album. There's anthemic pop rock on here, there's chamber pop and dance pop, there's progressive rock. It's really a mixed bag of a lot of things in the pop rock, indie rock realm. If there's anything in that area that you enjoy, you'll probably find one track on this album that captures that sound. If even any of that sounds like your cup of tea, I highly advise checking this album out. Given that it's as varied as it is, this selection I've picked isn't quite indicative of the entire album, but again, if you like even 1% of this, I highly suggest going and checking the whole thing out. There's something in there you're going to like.
Another day without the sun, as Cain awakes to name the animals, but can't find a single one. His wandering is never done, escapes and reveries and chemicals, he's uncomfortably numb. We're living in a fever dream as we careen through an all-night bender. We're swimming in an endless stream.
Girls Nails is a group that debuted a few years back with a couple of EPs, but this is their first LP, and I really think that this is a fantastic start for them, maybe a soft restart, if you will. The production is a bit on the lo-fi side of things, giving it a nice indie rock sort of fuzz and slightly amateurish sounds. Some instruments are too big, some instruments are too thin, but it all kind of comes together somehow into something that feels quite unique to them. Musically, it's a little bit of the twinkly guitar work of Midwest Emo with some of the bigger bass sounds of indie rock and, well, trumpet from ska, all mixed into a more progressive type of writing. Much of this features extended layering on top of ideas, counterpoint, polyrhythms. The drummer is just wild, keeping the time, sure, but wild flourishes all over the place. It has a very progressive leaning to all of this, and that actually lends itself to the structure and pacing as well. For only having 6 songs, we're looking at a 36-minute album, with one of the songs going past 8 minutes long, which to me is just an oddity for math rock or Midwest emo. It gives these songs a feeling of progression, as we don't just have a standard song structure with an extended solo part in the middle for some flowery finger picking on the guitar. No, all these songs are journeys, going through these ideas and feeling like a story is being told. It's a bit of an eclectic sound, but if any of that lo-fi, indie rock, Midwest emo, uh, ska sounds all pushed together in progressive tendencies sounds interesting to you, then I highly request that you keep this band on your radar.
Take away from all this, I can promise to have it not need a thing. Call me when you see this, the better half dazed and confused, I'm higher than high, rooftop of the door.
Hiatus Coyote is it's kind of tough to explain. On the one hand, we have pretty straightforward R&B. Great grooves, funky jazzy feels, fantastic bass licks and bass tone and bass presence. If you're a bass fan, just go ahead and check this one out. Forget about anything else I have to say. The drum grooves are excellent, and the vocals are so smooth. Just a fantastic R&B sound. On the other hand, it's a progressive album. And it likes to create a very clear delineation between when they're doing one and when they're doing the other. Most of these songs start off in very traditional R&B fashion. Granted, there might be some more progressive elements to it if you're a fan of odd time phrases, time signatures, odd rhythmic phrases, interesting chord progressions. This album is certainly for you, especially if you want something a bit lighter and funkier to go along with that too. But it also incorporates very interesting use of electronic sounds, not really instruments, but just unusual timbres, drone, noise elements. It can get very eclectic at time where you still have that core bass groove and drum beat going on behind noise, just like random sounds. It is something that is quite to be experienced. I'm not going to say that I enjoyed every moment of this album, but it's experimental in a way that I think works for me and presents the R&B sound in a brand new light. And I want to shine a little bit of light on them and what they're doing with this.
Too many people, some of them riding. Where are the good ones? How do we find them? What is it for? Who we like, who we ignore? You don't make friends, you recognize them. Yeah, well, he is a wild thing. He's down to earth, yeah. He's on my wavelength and he's not hard work. Never looking to bother. He's got his own thing down and it's never a problem for me.
The Pineapple Thief. It leads to this. This is just such a feel-good album in a way of hopefulness for the future. It is predicated mostly on moody atmospheres punctuated by glittery positivity, but lyrically, a lot of this song is about being in despair now, knowing that things will get better later. And the album tries to balance this sonically, presenting some of this despair and gloominess while making sure that it's not the only thing present. And on top of that, as it's pretty common with a lot of the albums this year, beautiful vocal melodies, layers, and harmonies. I mean, that's like the bare minimum, I think, to be on this list. It's present in 90% of the stuff I've picked. Another thing that I enjoy about this is that this album is based on slow burns, but not the slow layering up of things, but a way of building upon an idea. Not not like every 8 bars we're just going to add another layer on, but this is a core concept we've built. How can we expand upon that? The next time we revisit it, maybe it's the chorus. The next time we come to the chorus, we'll transform it a little bit, change it into this other thing, make it feel bigger. And this whole concept of building up from basic ideas, of creating something larger and stronger as time goes on, I think works really well with this concept of having a hopeful future built out of despair. Before we get into the final category of Eternal Spins, I do want to take a moment to highlight some of the albums that I just didn't get a chance to go through. There's about 45 in here. They were things that I was excited about enough, and some of them I really think would have made this list, but I just didn't get a chance to get to them. Part of that is just because of the large number of albums that are released every year that catch my attention. There's still so many areas of music that I don't even have as much of a radar on, stuff that I'm sure I would have liked if I had even known about it. I mean, there's so much great art that comes out every year. Another part is just that I got burned out. Aside from doing the album reactions, I don't think I listened to any album on my own in the last 2 or 3 months of last year. It was too much music, I think, trying to keep up with the release cycle. And so, unfortunately, not everything made it. But that does bring us to our final category, and unlike previous years, there's only one album here. As much as I enjoyed a lot of the music that I listened to last year, there was only one band that had me keep coming back for more. And that was Relica, Secrets of the Future. This just has my name written all over it. I mean, how often do y'all hear me talk about dynamics and contrast on this channel? This band has it in spades while packaging it up all into something that is simultaneously heavy and metallic, but also light and poppy even at times. It walks that line very finely while also throwing in dashes of hip hop even across the spectrum. There are more forward-placed rock-delivered vocals. There's lighter, airier pop-delivered vocals. There are full-on rap segments. It is progressive in a lot of ways too, not just in throwing all of these different ideas together, but even in structure. So many of these songs stick around the general verse-chorus idea, but they also deviate from that plenty of times as well. It's a little taste of everything, whether you like more progressive ideas or traditional, pure rock, pure metal, pop, the mix of all of this that we're hearing in a lot of modern metalcore. If you like some electronic sounds in here, this band just does all of it with flourish and pizzazz. The production is immaculate, and it all just comes together into an album that left me wanting more every single time it was over. And honestly, I kept hitting that play button again.
Cry for the horror, the cold world forced you to see. Sometimes I wonder if you like it. I bet you'd pay to watch some people bleed. Hands up, pray for the wicked, pay the way up. Sending a love all the way to the top of the fuckers to chew it up and spit it out like it's offensive. Mask off, no pretending. Sympathy's gone, you spent it. Making one's fun, but who ends it? Hands up, give us something nice to dream about. Blanketed by a thick haze, we hallucinate as our lungs give out. Falling stars making craters out of our homes.
a billion with their hands up, one foot in the grave, forever cast in stone.
Like basic feel to keep diving as if you earned it. If it's your hand that feeds, I'm sharpening my razor teeth.
And that wraps it up for the 2024 recap of the music that I enjoyed over the year. I don't like calling this an album of the year list. I don't know. It's just my opinion, right? And it's tough for me to even say one was better than the rest. Although this year there was one album that kept my attention, which is a little different. So I guess I kind of did have a number one last year. But I don't like to rank music that way. I just like to highlight good stuff that I hear. Anyways, this is what I found last year that I really enjoyed, but that's nowhere near the end of the conversation. What were some of your favorite albums of last year? Go ahead and let me know down in the comments. Not only will I find some cool stuff to check out, but if it's judging by the comments that we saw in the previous 2 years of this, lots of people find some fantastic music from the comment sections of these yearly recaps. So it is a great place for discovery for everyone within the community. As usual, be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to. I'll catch y'all later.